behalf of our Advanced Mid-Atlantic region to our first conference workshop. And I'm very pleased to introduce Drs. Lisa St. Odom from Clemson University and Seth Gillen from Anderson University with our workshop on self-led teaching and internal family systems approach to the private voice lesson.
Thank you. So we do want to begin today just with a small trigger warning. We are going to be talking about the inner workings of the mind. We're going to be talking about mental health and dealing with that in the studio. And some of our statistics mention things like mental disorders and self-harm, which can be unsettling for a person. And so we just want to mention that up front and let you know that whatever you need to do for yourself to take care of your mental health, we support you in doing that. So I am Dr. Seth Gillen, and I teach at Anderson University here in South Carolina.
I'm Dr. Lisa St. Odom, and I teach at Clemson University, also here in South Carolina. So this is a part of me that is so excited to be here with you today. I'm thrilled. I'm really this is the first time we've talked about this in public, and I'm just overwhelmed with excitement. But also, there's another part of me that's a bit anxious. I know that the things we're going to present to you, I don't always do perfectly myself. And since there are people who are sometimes in the room with me here, I feel a little anxious about that. But I'm going to try to hold both of those parts within myself as we talk today.
And I'm the same way. I have 3 parts going on simultaneously. I'm really excited to be here, but there is a part of my brain that is screaming, "What are you doing? You always sign us up for these things." And it's not real thrilled, but that's okay. And then I have a nerdy part that's been researching for like 4 years and is just thrilled to finally be talking about these things in public. So let's start with what internal family systems is. Internal family systems is a modality of psychotherapy. It was developed in the 1980s by Dr. Richard Schwartz. And it has some distinct features. So first of all, it's evidence-based, which means it's gone through double-blind trials and is effective in treating mental disorders. Also, it's non-pathologizing, which is a big distinct feature. So instead of viewing mental health symptoms as a sign that there is a disorder or that there is a disease, instead it views it as a symptom of the life that that person has led and the trauma that they have experienced. And then lastly, IFS is client-centered, which simply means in IFS, the therapist views the person's self, the client, as the one capable of healing themselves rather than the therapist doing all of the work for them. So Lisa's going to talk about how we came to this work.
I'll do that while we let that do what it wants to do. So how the two of us came to Internal Family Systems and how it showed up in our work. So Seth and I both individually were people who were involved in therapy, and we both were working with therapists for ourselves who were internal family systems therapists to use that modality. And I know I, for one, and he's expressed the same to me, that I found the help that it was giving me was tremendous. I noticed in myself more days of calm and peace and much more confidence, much more courageousness in my life and what I was doing. That calmness allowed more creativity in my life. And Seth has expressed that he felt the same. What's really interesting is bringing that self into the studio without doing anything different really other than operating from that self changed the way I taught. It changed the things that I said to my students, the things I didn't say to my students, and it changed the environment of my studio without me intentionally making changes. As I changed myself, it changed the way I practiced in my studio. And then what we really noticed was that it was impacting our students. They were receiving the benefits of, they were receiving the benefits of the work we were doing on ourselves. So we started talking about this. These are, amazing changes that I'm seeing in myself and in my studio, and realizing that we were seeing the same results really that came from this personal work we were doing. So then we decided to really purposefully try to adhere to these principles of IFS in our studio and observe the differences we saw in our students, and in fact they were tremendous.
Can I jump in just
Please
one
do,
second?
yeah.
I see some of you taking photos. I'm happy to provide you with slides at the end, a link so that you don't have to feel pressured to keep up.
Thank you. So, what we've discovered, the changes that we noticed in ourselves and in our studios. For us, a greater personal awareness. I am aware now when something that's going on with my student starts to affect me. It gives me a certain reaction. I am now aware of that. Greater insight into my interactions with my students. Why is the student this way today? They were totally different last week. This is not the student I know. There's less confusion about that now. I have much more clarity about what's happening in my studio and in the interactions between me and my students. For me, this next one was huge. Less urgency in the studio. This competition is coming up and we have so much to do and you have still have so far to go. And especially this responsibility to rescue or fix the students. Most of us go into this profession because we are helpers by nature, and so it comes naturally to us to want to rescue and fix our students. And that calmness that took over as I practiced IFS allowed me to not operate with such urgency. Less pressure to motivate the students. Instead, students are finding their own motivation, and it becomes not my job anymore to motivate them. And less exhaustion and burnout. I'm much more satisfied with the work I've done every day when I go home. It's not that I'm not tired, but less of that full mental exhaustion and feeling of burnout. And certainly, I'm more fulfilled in my teaching. I feel like I'm being more successful, and that's a huge benefit in your job, as you can imagine. Benefits that we notice for the students, the lessons in general are calmer, and we know we can't really accomplish anything in the lesson very successfully if the students aren't in a nice calm state. So the lessons were calmer, and we were seeing growth in the students' confidence as well, again, without us addressing their confidence. A growth in self-efficacy, the students taking responsibility for their own motivation, their own work, the things that they want to do themselves. A growth in independence that goes along with that, and lower performance anxiety, more courage as they approach things that might be challenging for them, and more self-motivation. Again, a curiosity about what can I learn in my practice time on my own. So these were huge benefits as far as we were concerned in the learning environment.
So why is all of this important? So we are currently in the middle of a mental health crisis. If you're teaching at the college level, you probably don't have to be convinced of this, but I'll give you a few statistics. This survey is done every year. 96,000 college students took it. 44% of the students reported symptoms of depression. 37% said that they are experiencing anxiety, and 15% said that they are currently considering suicide. These are the highest rates in the 15 years of the survey. Another survey that's done is of directors of counseling centers who said that 90%, 90% of them say we're seeing more students need services. And many counseling centers are triaging the very severe cases and taking 2 to 3 weeks to get to those that are not severe. So access to mental health is also down. And so voice teachers are on the front line of this mental health crisis. And we often unwillingly get pushed into that role of pseudo-therapist where we're like, here's a person in distress. I want to help. What does it look like to help?
So we don't have to tell you that we are on the front line. You know it. You probably have a box of Kleenex on your desk, just like I do. We are aware that we are encountering students who are feeling very vulnerable because singing is an embodied activity and it's engaging our emotional centers in our brain. And once we are in our body and in those emotional centers, we are much more vulnerable. So that's one reason that we really find ourselves on the front line. Also, we teach our students one at a time, of course. So this visibility issue, of us one-on-one. It's not like they're one of 100 in a class with one professor, but they get to know us just like we get to know them because we see them every week. And then of course, we have these ability to track patterns with our students because we see them every week. Well, last week they were like this, but this week they're different. We can really observe those patterns changing. And then obviously we come face to face sometimes with students who are feeling emotionally dysregulated. Whether it's just today, something has happened, or whether it is a pattern for that student, we are coming face to face with them and they come to us in a vulnerable state and we see all sorts of moments of dysregulation in the studio. So our main questions are, how do we help without becoming a pseudo-therapist, and what are the ethical boundaries that we need to put in place to keep our students safe? Because we know that we're not trained to be therapists. We do not want to assume that role, that's a responsibility not only that's not for us, but that would be dangerous for us to take on. Our job is to train singers. So how do we help those singers who are people that we learn to care about without becoming pseudo-therapists? So this is part of a larger conversation that's happening in the voice pedagogy world. And there are 3 issues that IFS really addresses that we're talking about in this world. And one is the voice teacher's scope of practice. So what is our training and what is our job? Our training is teaching singing, and our job is to teach singing. That is our focus, that is our scope of practice. How do we do that with emotionally dysregulated students is another issue. But we know that our training isn't in therapy. IFS provides clear boundaries with their therapists. What is the therapist's job and what is the client's job? And we're going to show you how those guidelines for therapists can actually guide teachers in what is my job and what is the job of my student. What do I want to lead them towards their own agency for self to accomplish. And then trauma-informed pedagogy is something you are probably hearing talked about a lot. There was a recent article in the Natch Journal about it. I mean, it just came out like a week or 2 ago. So we are encountering students all the time who have experienced trauma, and so we are all interested in how to make our studios a safer place for those students to learn. So how do we offer a safe learning environment for all? IFS is a trauma-informed practice. So it follows the 6 pillars of trauma-informed practices that therapists and psychiatrists use, and so it is a safe way for us to operate. And then the master-apprentice legacy is something else that's really being evaluated in our world, this idea that there is a teacher, an expert who knows everything, who is in charge of fixing the student, who is finding all the flaws and has all the answers. And is that really the relationship that voice teachers should have with their students? And IFS is a client-centered approach within therapy that's all about the clients taking responsibility for themselves, for their own growth. And that really gives us insight about how we want to approach voice lessons by giving the power and the agency back to our students to take charge of their own learning. So what we are talking about today, the framework, what is IFS? How do we apply this in a private lesson that's not doing therapy? How are we applying IFS in our teaching? And then we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so feel free to save up all those questions, and we hope we'll have plenty of time to answer those at the end.
So we're going to take a very fast deep dive. Things are going to get thick for a minute, but we're going to come out on the other end, I promise. And if I go too fast, throw up hands or ask questions. It's okay to interrupt me. So let's start with what IFS is. IFS is a transformative tool that conceives of every human being as a system of both protective parts and wounded parts that are inside, led by a core self. And we believe that the mind is naturally multiple, and that is a good thing. So in our culture, we pathologize multiplicity. If you hear voices on the inside, we label that as schizophrenic. If you change altered states, one day you're happy and the next day you're sad, we may call that bipolar. So we pathologize this multiplicity that happens within us. So let's take a look at the model of the mind. traditional view is that there is only one mind, the monomind. And this causes some difficulties for us. So it leads us to saying there's only one me, I am me. And that leads us to thinking that the thoughts that we're having on the inside, that is us, that's our perspective. And so we blend with those thoughts. And we say things like, I am angry, I am sad, and we have a difficulty explaining, I am angry and I am sad. Or I am angry and I'm happy, right? So it makes it difficult to explain these conflicting behaviors. For instance, if you have a student, graduate student, who's aiming for a professional degree, and they have all the right stuff for it, but every time they get on stage, they fall apart. It makes it very difficult to explain why that's happening, right? And so it leads to frustration and confusion. Then we're going to look at the plural mind, or what you may hear me refer to as multiplicity. So in the multiple mind, it's a complex system of distinct subpersonalities. So in IFS, we do not consider these subpersonalities to simply be thoughts or feelings, but to be completely distinct entities that see the world through a different lens. A part of you that sees the world and needs this, a different part that has a completely different opinion. And that on the inside, those different parts interact with one another, and they interact with the world on the outside. Those can be led by the core self. This allows us to differentiate from our thoughts. So it allows us to see, this is me, and this is what's going on for me, rather than, this is me, and I see the world in this way. And then lastly, it offers explanation of conflicting behaviors. So perhaps your student, your graduate student, has a part that really wants to be witnessed, and they really look at the stage and are gung-ho. But they have another part that when they get there, only sees the catastrophes that could happen. And it begins speaking all of the failure that could happen. They blend with it, and that part takes them off the stage. So you're probably already aware of your multiplicity in some way. All of this happens on a very subconscious level. But we say common things in the English language, like, I rarely get angry, but once the switch flips, you better watch out. I have that part. Part of me would like to go out tonight and party. Part of me really needs to rest, right? And also the whole movie Inside Out, which is a cartoon depiction of this inner world that occurs with us, that if you saw that, you probably found yourself nodding along and going, oh, do I ever know that sad part? So I want to introduce you to yourself, who you actually are, the real you. Self can and should lead the individual's internal system. It's the leader. It doesn't always lead because of the injuries that we have faced. Every person, no matter how injured they are, has a self, because the self cannot be damaged, but it can be obscured, right? So just like the sun, when it's a really cloudy day, the sun does not go away. When it's nighttime, the sun does not go away, it still exists. And in the same way, the self is still there, even if a person has moved into a pattern of protecting themselves because they don't feel safe. The self is an inner healer, a teacher, a friend, a parent, a counselor, and the ultimate support giver. And this is non-exhaustive, but there are 5 P words that describe an IFS therapist, what they try to do, and there are 8 qualities of self. Dr. Schwartz literally said, the C words are the most positive C words I could think of, and they all start with C so we can remember them. But it's not exhaustive, but this is a good feeling for what that on the inside, or a good take of what on the inside is there for you. So we can either be self-led or we can be protector-led. Self-led is when a person has the capacity to hear, to understand, and to be present with parts, acknowledging the importance and appreciating the importance of their role in the internal system. and with other people. So literally, self-led is the ability to hear what's within yourself and be with it and appreciate what it's doing for you rather than judging it as a negative trait that has to go away. So just like families, real families, we get pushed into roles. And so we get pushed into those roles because our psychic response to injury is predictable. When we are injured, when vulnerable parts are wounded, or other parts step in to protect. So injuries are those things that happen to us that dismiss us, abuse us, neglect us, or shame us. And when we don't have, as children, the resources to go to someone and to process that experience, then it gets shoved down very, very deeply within the brain and gets exiled. So the first part of the system is exiles. These are the wounded parts. When you meet them, they're often very, very young parts. So when we encounter traumatic things that we don't know how to deal with, and we don't know how to process, and we don't have the resources for someone to lovingly be there with us, the brain fragments it off and says, no, we're not going to experience that. And then we have managers that, of course, feeling those deeply painful experiences are re-traumatizing. And so our managers are a group of parts that say, we're going to be proactive about this, and we're going to get out in front, and we are not going to feel that pain. And so they take lots of strategies like striving, controlling, evaluating, overthinking, achieving, caretaking, and even terrorizing. And then lastly, we have our reactive protectors, the firefighters. So reactive protectors are those parts of us that come up when we experience that pain. So when the exile gets triggered and we feel what we felt as that little person who couldn't do anything about it, the firefighter comes in like a hero and says, you are now out of pain, we will not think about that, go back to the basement, I'm in control. They typically have some pretty extreme behaviors that have a lot of collateral damage in our lives. So drinking, drug use, binge eating, those types of things to numb out the pain. And of course, self is at the center. So what does it look like to be protector-led? When parts take over, we become blended with them. So this is a huge concept, right? So the core of us, the self, when these parts get triggered, they blend with self to where we see through their eyes, we hear with their ears, we feel what they feel. So we're going to walk through the mechanics, and we're going to use an exile that holds the belief, I am done. And we're going to give it an imaginary story that it struggled to read when it was very little, and was shamed by educators that it couldn't quite keep up with its peers. And so it's taken on the belief of, I am done. Of course, that's uncomfortable to feel, and so managers say, I will work hard, we will achieve, and we will never rest. Of course, that strategy is not sustainable because one cannot always work, right? And so when we rest or when we encounter other things in life, it may only take a joke being said at work that you didn't quite get and a colleague saying, oh, come on, think about it. And all of a sudden, all of that shame of I'm left out and I don't remember and I'm done, overwhelms the system. And of course, that is an untenable position to be in, and so firefighters come in spraying water everywhere with a strategy like, I need a drink, or 10, but tonight I'm not feeling that pain. Of course, this has collateral damage, just like real firefighters, they put out the fire, but water damage is everywhere. Still yet, we don't consider them a bad part because they have great intent for us. They're working extremely hard to protect us from something that's very important. So rather than coming in, if you were working very, very hard at something it's very important, and someone came in and said, "You're bad," the fight would be on, right? And so IFS's approach to that is not that you are bad or evil, but this part is working very, very hard for you. So there's 3 steps in the process. The first step is that the client goes to those protective parts, gets to know them, and differentiates from this is self and these are the parts. The second step is that they befriend those protectors, showing appreciation for the role that they're doing, understanding their role, and then the protector will give access or give permission to that stuff in the brain that is way down deep. Then the third step of the process is that with permission, the self is able now to go to the wounded parts and is able to hear their story, is able to experience what they experienced, and is able to redo or fix what had happened to them. And when that happens, incredible healing is possible. So I just said the client does this, the client does this, the client does this. If the client does this, what does the therapist do?
So this is what the IFS therapist does and does not do, and we can use a lot of these to guide us as teachers as well. So one thing that IFS therapist does is model self-leadership. So they make sure that they are self-led when they are in a session with the client. They are listening to the parts that are speaking to them, they are trying to understand, and they are appreciating the role of the parts, even if the parts are causing problems for their client. And then they are exhibiting the 8 C's and the 5 P's in themselves. What the therapist does not do is blend with their own parts during the session. Even if they feel triggered by something their client says, they hold close to their self and they do not blend with their own parts, and they do not speak from their parts. So they do not let their protective parts speak, they only speak to their clients from self. The other thing that the IFS therapist does is help the client differentiate and access self. So they help their clients see that this is a part and this is self. They show curiosity and compassion. They don't tell the client this is parts and this is self, but they show curiosity around it. They show compassion for the struggles that the client is going through. And they use the 6 F's, which are find, as in they help the clients guide them towards finding the part in their body. They guide the clients then to focus in on that part, and then flesh out that part. How do you experience it? Do you see an image of that part? Do they live in a certain place inside your body? Is it a physical sensation? And then feel. They guide the client to think about, what do I feel towards the part? And if you feel something other than the 8 C's, that's still a part-led process. What a client should be feeling towards their parts is compassion, appreciation, and so the therapist guides that process. But what the therapist does not do is tell the client what parts are present. Well, you have this part and this part and this part. They let the client do that for themselves. They just show curiosity to help guide the client through their own agency to discover those parts. And they do not tell the client what to do or what to feel. Again, they just show compassion and curiosity and let the client discover that for themselves. Something else that the IFS therapist does, they hold unconditional positive regard for the client. All parts welcome, no bad parts. That's the name of one of Dick Schwartz's book. No bad parts. They look at the client and they see nothing but good parts as well as self, parts trying to help that client. And they do not pathologize. They do not see the struggles that the clients are having as symptoms of a disorder. And then something they do not do then is judge the client's parts as bad or diagnose symptoms of a disorder or disease. Another thing the IFS therapist does is trust the wisdom of the client's inner system. Trusting can be hard, but that is what they do. They trust that that client's self, that client's inner system, is able to take care of that client. They do not advise the client what to do, and they do not pry for more information about the past or about what's going on right now. The next to last thing the IFS therapist does is center the client's needs, wants, and agenda. They do not dictate what work needs to be done. Now you need to work with this part and discover this. They don't do that. They let the client share that or do that work. And they do not center themselves by oversharing. They try to keep the focus on that client. And the last thing that the IFS therapist does is help the client explore their inner world of parts. So they do provide some of the content, some of this information like what we shared today, but also ideas. They don't provide the ideas or solutions. They simply help the client explore, but they do not provide ideas or solutions or even, again, say something about those parts. So if we move on to the job of the voice teacher, all of these things can apply to what we do, except helping the client explore their inner world of parts. That is the job of an IFS-trained therapist, to guide the client through their inner world of parts. As teachers, that doesn't really have much to do with singing, so that's not something that we have the expertise to do. So that is work that we reserve for the therapist. But as self-led teachers, we acknowledge the parts that are at play, and we use this systems thinking to help students return to their own agency, their own autonomy, their own leadership of themselves. We don't do that by entering their world. They explore their own inner world, and we simply empower them to do that.
So we're going to take a look at what are the ethical boundaries to keep our students safe. As Lisa said a minute ago, as we began, there is a Journal of Singing article that was just published. It came out about a week ago, and I was so grateful to be able to include it, where these three ladies with expertise in trauma-informed education and psychology published for us a scope of practice for the voice teachers and recommended this table that lays out what is in scope for us as voice teachers and what is out of scope for voice teachers. So if I just jump backwards, if we model self-leadership within ourselves, if we help our student differentiate and access their own self, if we hold unconditional positive regard for the student, which simply means whatever their behavior is, we see it as a protective thing, not as you are not working and you're lazy. But I wonder why a part of my student is having a hard time getting to the practice room. And if we trust the student's system to reveal what they feel is needed and to not reveal what they feel is not needed, and we center their experience and their needs and wants, then I want to show you how that aligns with the boundaries that they published. So here's the great irony. Being guided by IFS, which is a modality of psychotherapy, helps us stay well within the boundaries of our scope of practice as voice teachers. It's a great irony that knowing about psychotherapy keeps us from doing it. So I can mark off 3 of these boundaries, or check them off as, yes, I follow those, if I just trust the wisdom of the system. Frank Anderson, one of the trainers of IFS, said, we assume when he was asked about exploring trauma stories and getting into the nitty-gritty, he said, we assume that we're not hearing the whole story. We don't need this information to do our job. We can help the client regardless of what she reports to us about historical events. So the 3 I can mark off: asking the student direct questions about their trauma history. What exactly happened? How many times? This is something that an IFS therapist doesn't do. If the part feels the need to reveal that information, the therapist will listen. And if the part does not disclose that information, they trust that there was a good reason they didn't disclose it. Unpacking a student's trauma history, particularly without returning to the purpose of the voice lesson. Again, we don't pry, they don't pry. Guiding students through an understanding of the psychological origin of body reactions and investigating trauma connections. So an IFS therapist does not tell you why this is happening to you. They allow you to explore that on your own. And so if we just trust the student's inner system to reveal the information that is important to them them and they feel safe, I think that's what really trusting the system. The system will reveal what is safe for them. It will not reveal what is unsafe for them. So we don't stop a student from talking because that is what's coming up for them, and it can be shaming to say, hey, don't tell me this. And we don't ask more questions to ask for more information or to pull things out of them. Then I can check off 3 more if I just take a non-pathologizing approach of seeing these symptoms as a result of trauma and a person's protection of themselves rather than seeing it as a sign of disorder. So offering a psychological interpretation, that definitely sounds like PTSD. A therapist, an IFS therapist doesn't do that. Giving a definite explanation of what's occurring, you are definitely in fight or flight. Your body is doing what your body is doing is definitely related to this or that experience. Making assumptions about their level of dysfunction or danger. This behavior is unhealthy and you need to be in treatment. So even the IFS therapist sees those comments as very disrespectful to a person's system. And often will put the person on higher guard, right? I feel a bit of defensiveness if someone said that to me. And then lastly, self-led teaching does not center the student or the teacher's experience or expertise. So sharing a lot of information in an attempt to align. I feel your pain, my relative died too. So if we don't center ourselves as what is important in the moment of a lesson, then we're not nearly as tempted to overshare our own experience in life. So the overarching goal of IFS therapy is to cultivate self-leadership within the person. And that is what we want to cultivate in our students by interacting with them in a lot of the same ways that an IFS therapist interacts.
Wait, so you want us to do therapy with your students? We've been telling you about what the IFS therapists do. Is that what we're teaching you to do? No, definitely not. No, stop, do not, pass go, whatever it is. No. As Seth said earlier, the gift of IFS to voice teachers is that by teaching you about this modality of therapy, it keeps you from doing therapy with your students. So you know, if you're IFS informed, that your student has a self, which can and should lead their own parts, so we don't have to lead them. You can trust the wisdom of the student's inner system. It knows how to protect them. So we can allow their system to protect them or to show up as self as needed or able. You are not capable or responsible for leading their system, only your own. That should give us all a sigh of relief, right? We are not responsible for leading our students' systems, nor are we even capable. They are only capable of leading their own systems. So it's not a job that we have to take on. And we serve our students best by being self-led and not blending with our parts, particularly our expert or fixer parts, the parts that want to help, which again, no bad parts. Those are lovely parts. But we don't want those parts to come into the voice studio. So, part-led teaching says, I'm the expert, my student is hurting, it's my job to help them. But part-led teaching, there we go, self-led teaching says they already have all of the resources they need inside to lead themselves. So I can help them the most by being self-led. In this space, I am going to be in myself, and I'm going to encourage their own self-leadership. And that is the best how we can lead in that space.
So what do you want us to do? We are requesting that you think about intentionally creating a studio environment that promotes self-leadership. This is not therapy, but it is therapeutic for a person to be handed the reins of their life and to be taught how to lead themselves and to be given permission to lead themselves. So I love this quote. It is a guiding principle of IFS, and that is self begets self, and parts beget parts. So when I am able to hold my own self-leadership, when I'm able to listen to my parts, when I'm able to appreciate their role, when I'm able to listen to what they need and want and take care of them, then that enables other people around me to enter into their own self-leadership. But if I walk around being blended with a fixer part, let's say, then often what I'm going to get to engage with is a person's hurt part, because they sense fixer, oh, that feels good. Or if I walk around being angry and being blended with an angry part, then everyone around me is ready for the fight because they notice what's going on in my system. So my system affects my student's system. And so a self-led teaching looks like this. It models self-leadership. It exhibits this 8 C's and the 5 P's. It holds unconditional positive regard for your student's whole system, both their parts that argue, their parts that disagree, their parts that activate your system. It encourages autonomy, and it guides the students back to their own agency. And it trusts the wisdom of the student's system. Part-led teaching looks sort of like this. It centers the teacher's expertise as what is going to get that student to the next level. It follows the teacher's agenda. You need to do this, and then you need to do this, and then I want this done by this time, and then you need to do this. It views the teacher as the master who is responsible and capable of fixing the student. And it encourages dependency by controlling what practice is done, what repertoire is done, and when performances can occur. And it pathologizes the symptoms. You have a great voice, but you're lazy. So how do we help without becoming the pseudo-therapist?
So we're going to practice, and as we practice, we're going to ask you to sort of go through this with us, think, notice, and we're going to remind you as we do this practice that there are no bad parts. All parts are welcome, so whatever parts come up for you as we do this exercise, if it's a part that says something you wouldn't want it to say, we're not going to think of that as a bad part. That part is welcome to engage with us.
So you can scan the QR code if you would like to give input. If you would like to speak for a part that comes up within you during these exercises, you can. I don't know whether it will show your name or not, so I just want to give you that. I don't know how it works that well. I've never used it. But if you don't want your name, if you're not comfortable with your name being up there, then maybe don't participate in that way. So we're going to give you 3 imaginary students in imaginary circumstances. And then we're going to ask you to take a moment and to look within yourself and see what thoughts, feelings, sensations come up. People experience their own parts in lots of different ways. Some people experience it as a bodily sensation. I get a headache, or my cheeks get flushed, or my stomach starts rumbling. Other people experience parts as only thoughts. Some people experience parts as images that come up for them.
So our first student who we're going to encounter is Vlad. Vlad is laid back and calm most of the time. He's a finalist at the NSA NATS competition, very exciting. Today is his last lesson before he flies out to participate in the competition. So when you, as his teacher, ask him if he's ready for the competition, he informs you that he's decided he's not going. Because I don't want to waste your time, I'm not going to win, and besides, I don't have anything to wear, I forgot to get my pants down. So that's what he says. So if you're the teacher and you encounter that student, think for a moment. You can close your eyes if that's helpful, you're welcome to, you don't have to. But when you encounter that student, what thoughts come up? Or what feelings? What images, sensations? What is the reaction that's caused in you?
So before we go to the next slide, I want to tell you that I wrote the parts that you're going to see, and in an attempt to not let you feel shame about what may come up in yourself. How might I have known what could be going on for you because it goes on within me. So a part-led response might be, I've worked hard to help you get here, and now you're just going to blow it off? You have to go. I'll hem the pants. You're being silly. You were my best shot at having a winner from my studio, and that would have been good for my portfolio. And tenure is coming up. I'm a horrible teacher. How did I let this happen? Other people are so much better at motivating students. And then I can highlight some of you. Let's see if I can be fancy. I don't know. Maybe I should just read them. So some of your parts that came up. Empathy, that's lovely. Empathy also can be a part, because empathy also joins in the pain usually, or joins in the emotion. Confusion, why is he feeling like this? But also willingness to help him succeed. Fear, dude, you've already wasted my time. Wait, what? You've worked so hard. There is no reason to give up now just because you are nervous. Fear. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, and so we're going to teach you to do a U-turn. A U-turn can also be spelled Y-O-U-turn, or it can be a U-turn. So our response to these triggering life events as teachers are usually to do this, right? You're causing me to be uncomfortable. You're doing this to me. And that's just kind of a typical human response, right? So a U-turn goes, something is going on within my system. I wonder what that's about. So then we do, okay, so can I get curious about this part? Can I get curious about this response? What's going on for me? Why is this such a big deal? So if we can gain some insight, some clarity about it, that can help us shift back to self. If we differentiate, where we say like, I'm so mad, instead of I'm so mad, why is a part of me so mad? Shifts us back away from that emotion and back towards self. Can I get curious about it? Am I feeling urgency? Do I have an agenda right now? Can you tell me why this is a big deal to you? So on the inside, you simply are able to talk to parts. The thought that pops up without you thinking is often the part that you're speaking to. So you can just on the inside say, tell me about this. Why is it a big deal? And often parts will go, it's such a big deal because I don't know. Right? And then, can I have compassion for this part? So can I meet this part where it's at and have compassion rather than holding a judgmental attitude about it? And one I didn't put up there, but what do you need? What in this moment, what do you need? Well, I'm feeling really insignificant. Okay. Thanks for telling me that. So when we do this U-turn, it shifts us back to clarity, which is a self-led thing, about what is happening and what we're feeling on the inside. And it allows us courage to speak for the parts rather than from them. And so this is how that conversation might go. Big caveat as might go. It also could go haywire. So I'll read Lisa will read the teacher and I'll read Vlad.
So I'm the teacher. I have just done this U-turn. I am speaking from self. And I say to Vlad, I respect your right to choose what's best for you. I'm curious why your plan changed.
It just did.
Did I misunderstand? I thought you wanted to do this. I'm checking for a shared agenda.
Because if the agenda has changed, we're going to follow the student's agenda. I did, but it's whatever. I just can't go.
So I speak for my part, not from it, but for it, and I say a part of me is disappointed because I was really thinking you had a shot.
I'm sorry, I'm disappointed too. I just couldn't get it all done.
Okay, I'm here to support your agenda. I'll accept what you want to happen, but would it be okay for me to share some curiosity with you? So I'm checking for his consent that we continue this conversation.
Sure.
You've worked so hard for this. Is all of you on board with this decision?
So all of you on board is a way to bring awareness that there's maybe more than one thing going on for the student. So the conversation could go then one of two ways. Perhaps the student says, yeah, I'm disappointed, but it's a dumb deal.
And the teacher says, okay, I support you doing what's best for yourself. Next time we'll do it.
Or it could go, you could get the real reason, I just can't afford to go.
I might have some options then to help you if you'd like.
If you'd like. So giving agency back to the singer over and over and over and over again eventually convinces them that self is inside and can lead. This is Ella. You notice that she's singing a rhythm wrong and you stop her, and before you can say anything, the tears start flowing, and she says, I know, don't say anything. I know what the problem is. I had it right in the practice room, but when I'm in here, I'm a nervous wreck. Just give me a moment. I love the smiles on your faces. It tells me you recognize the scenario. So if you look inside, that's a good one. Yeah, so you're all sort of on the same board, which is curiosity. What about me makes you so stressed? What am I doing that causes this? That causes this response in you? So if we do our, I skipped. Part-led response might be, you can't talk to yourself that way in my studio. And I just want to share that if a student is harming themselves, yes, step in. But if a student is talking to themselves in a negative way, I wouldn't go against the protector by telling them that's not healthy. You need more confidence. Don't be silly, you're smart. Whoa, you are stressed. What's going on? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Sit down and breathe and then tell me all about it. Why are you crying? What did I say? I didn't say anything mean. So we do our U-turn. And then this is what that conversation might look like. Take the time you need, exhibiting calm. I see this is tough. Compassion. She's asked for time.
So she continues to sob.
She's asked for time, so be present and calm.
As she continues to sob,
Check inside with that anxious part that is saying, help! You know what it feels like to feel this way, fix it. Because it's untenable to continue to let this happen in your studio. What if someone walks by the door and sees this child crying in my office?
and finally Ella says, I try so hard and never get it right.
I'm getting all of that. You are such a hard worker, Ella, appreciating the role that that part is playing for her.
I want to get better.
I hear that, and I'm here with you. Connectedness. I have a few ideas, but most of me is just curious to know what you'd like to happen in this moment, or what you'd like to happen now. How can I help? So again, taking that agency back to the student and not saying, this is what you need to do. This is one of the great ways that IFS departs from the current conversation going on in trauma-informed education, that the suggestion of most practitioners is lead them through a breathing exercise, or let's do grounding exercises with them. I take issue with that because it still is communicating to the student being upset in my presence is not okay. And this is how you get out of that state. So it takes control. It maintains the power differential dynamic of, I know how to fix you, and you can't do this in my presence. So what will end up happening often is a restuffing of all of that back down to where I can't lose it in voice lessons, not with him. And so this thinking through things in the IFS informed way leads you to giving that person control of what they need to do, trusting that their system is built entirely to protect, and their system will protect. You can trust that. So we have a third for you.
So I'll tell you about Alex. Alex sings beautifully in the studio, but her singing is totally different when she performs. After a recent performance, you ask her how it went, and she says, "I'm not actually sure. I got really dizzy, and I don't remember anything about it. My hands went numb, and my heart was racing, but everyone else said it was fine, so..."
So we'll give you a moment. So a part-led response might look like, seriously? Well, that explains why your technique goes high. I used to do that, and I did therapy. Now I don't. That's not okay. That's not normal. We need to look into that. Oh no, she's dissociating on stage and doesn't even realize it. She must have severe childhood trauma. Do you pray before you go on stage? I have a perfect verse for you to meditate on before you go on stage. So we do our U-turn, and again, all of those parts are not intending harm. All of them are intending good for you. So the teacher might say, everyone else said it was fine, but how did you feel about it? Trying to recenter the student's experience and their own leadership.
I guess it was fine. I was excited to perform, but then I got super nervous.
Am I getting this right? You had some mixed emotions about it? Awareness of the plural mind?
Yeah, I wanted my family to see the work I'd done, but all I could think about is how I was going to be a big failure, and they were all going to laugh at me.
I see. Am I getting this right? So one of your neural networks was like, I can't wait to do this. And another one was like, no.
Yeah, that seems right. Why does that happen?
I don't know why that happens for you. Many people find performing stressful, and the brain uses lots of different strategies to deal. Thanks, Alex's brain.
So what do I do about it?
If you're curious, you can investigate what some people call performance anxiety. I don't call it performance anxiety, but that's what people who study this call it. There are lots of strategies to navigate stressful performances. Why don't you find what works for you? I'm excited to hear what you find. So I want to share just an anecdotal quote. This has not been studied in a double-blind formal study where we've surveyed students to find their experience and all of that jazz. That would be wonderful, but we sort of have just come upon this thing and changed our behavior and then have gone, wow, this sort of totally changes the ballgame. This came to me as an email from a student. And just to set it up, she was doing about 6 very, very, very difficult tasks. Being in a large show as a main character, senior recital, taking all of the praxis exams, student teaching, and doing a couple of jobs, cantoring and that sort of thing. And she wrote me at the end of that semester, and she said, "It was all so much, and I know for a fact that if I had done any of this last semester, I would have crumbled under the weight of it all with the mental strength of a wet napkin. But, and I'm not sure exactly when this happened, I felt ready for it. Like, I could properly see everything in front of me and organize it better. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of what I was doing rather than just reacting to what was happening. And that's not to say I wasn't worried or never felt anxiety about these projects. I definitely did. I was just able to manage it all in a much healthier way than I had in the past. So I don't share that as that I did that for the student. I did not heal the student with anxiety or depression or anything that she was experiencing. What I did is I consistently handed the reins back to her. And when she sent me the email, I saw this change happening. And I continued handing her more and more of the piece of the puzzle. Okay, what would you like to do about that? Okay, let's make a plan for that. What, you lead me. Tell me what you would do. And so when I received the email, it just was one of those crosses in the road where I went, okay, I've been taking on this whole teaching thing as I'm the expert in the room and I've got to fix this student and I've got to help. And I was burning out because students were reaching and grabbing and I need your help and I need you to warm me up and I need you to listen to me and can you evaluate this recording and can you, I can't do all this, right? And so this was the moment when I went, okay, the work that's going on within me is majorly changing things for them too. And now I leave my work feeling much more meaningful. And also for IFS therapists, they report that they're able to do much longer hours of therapy without burnout because it's not them coming up with all the ideas, the solutions, they're not carrying the burden and the weight of fixing this person. So if you're curious to explore, the gold standard of doing this work is to work with an IFS-trained therapist. And you can find an IFS-trained therapist at that website. I have to use this at some point. And I just would point out to you two things. There are two different types of therapists. There are licensed therapists who have a master's in mental health counseling on the website, and then you'll see the word practitioner. And these are people who do not have a master's in, or a license to practice therapy, but they're in the role of like life coaches. And then you can explore on your own. So this is a modality of therapy because the therapist sees you as a co-therapist. You don't necessarily need someone in the room to explore your inner system. And so there are two books that I would recommend for exploring on your own. The first is Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts, which is an audiobook read by the creator of IFS. And he leads you through exercises in an audiobook way where you can just sit and listen. It is really, really wonderful. And then Self-Therapy by Jay Early is a written book that walks you through the process. I will just put a bookmark in for you that these books do not go through the process of working with exiles or unburdening exiles because that work is quite dangerous to do on your own. Becoming blended with very deep, painful parts of yourself without someone there to guide you can be quite severe and dangerous. And so we want to thank you and hope you have a very self-filled day. And we would like to answer any questions that you have. You can either post those here or you can shout those out. And we have, I don't know what time it is, but we have, the next session is not until 2:30, so we don't have to feel rushed if you have questions or discussion.
I have a question about your thoughts on how to kind of continually achieve the things you're talking about within a system that, in my experience, maybe doesn't encourage that sort of work with our students, right? The idea of not pushing them, like you mentioned, needing them to do things so we can get tenure, those sorts of pressures. How do you find working within that system?
I'm thrilled that you asked this. I think, first of all, you have to recognize that our academic system is incredibly part-led. You must achieve, and you must prove what you have achieved. And so It is designed, one of my favorite statements is a system produces exactly what it was designed to do. And it is a system that stirs up achieving parts and puts us against ourselves. So first of all, believe that the student system will lead them in what's right for them. So following their agenda and accepting, it's difficult, but just accepting that you're there for the student, not for yourself. And if their agenda changes to a different major, supporting that and allowing it. Because I'm here for the person and their overall life, it's their life, not mine. But then the other thing that I found that meshes really, really well with this is my other great enjoyment, which is specifications grading, which was actually developed at Clemson University by Linda Nilsson. And it is a system that essentially lays out for the student what is needed to be accomplished for each grade. And rather grading based on like, you did this and you did this, so I'll give you a 70. It simply lays out very clearly the specification. You must attend this many lessons, and an excellent lesson looks like this, and a poor lesson looks like this. And then I find that to be much more self-led because it's very clear. And the student then can choose for themselves what's right. And they can choose, they can look at it and go, I'm doing the things in the C category because I need a C to graduate. And if that's what they want to do, that's awesome. Yes?
I just want to thank you, number one. This is super validating for us who tend not to be guru teachers. I'll speak for myself. So this is wonderful. And it also seems to dovetail with some teaching and learning literature that I've come across, student-centered teaching. And a lot of people at my institution are experimenting with ungrading, which scares the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
Or collaborative grading. I don't know if people
This is the
Heard that
same concept as
it's-
spec grading.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm scared to do it because I'm afraid that people who need C's are going to give themselves A's, and you kind of have to go with that. But I think, have you tried it yourself?
I've not done
Collaborative
ungrading.
Yeah.
The institutions I've worked at would not allow that.
Ah, okay.
But I do, some of my students are in the room, so don't listen. I structure courses as much like that as what I think I can get away with.
Right.
And I would also want to speak to what you said. So exactly what you said is that as you, all of these other things that are going on in our culture, as we have been studying IFS, it's just you read something about student-centered teaching, and if you know the IFS model, then you're like, yes, yes, yeah, ooh. No, not that one. And so we just over and over, we've been like, I wish they knew about IFS because that would explain that what's going on, or that would help them understand this. So this is our, Lisa and I have joined together as partners to try to bring this work to the world, and this is the first time we're talking about it publicly, so thank
Yay.
you for being here.
Well, thank you.
I'm just going to say one thing. When I think about this, and this is new to me, it takes the pressure off of me. I've often gone in and felt like I've got to do everything for the student, and as well-meaning as it is, I can see where that's not the best thing, and I feel like a big pressure has been taken off of my shoulders.
That's where that burnout shows
Yes.
up, that exhaustion, because we are trying to manage ourselves and everyone else we encounter in the day. And we are not as good at leading our students as they are at leading themselves and motivating, all those things that sometimes systems out there tell us that we need to do. It's your job to motivate your student. It's your responsibility what grade they get, and it's it's really not. It's our job to lead ourselves and empower them to lead themselves. And what we're seeing is great success. Students learning more and better and having a better experience, and we're not creating dependency so that when they leave us, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and that just leads to anxiety, and yeah, it's great.
A big part of my therapeutic process was dealing with this burnout and just really questioning, should I be in this career, thinking about changing because I just always burnt out and I'm not enjoying the work anymore. And a crucial moment for me was understanding, like getting to know those parts of me that are controlling and that are pouring into students over and over and over, was understanding that the more I do that, actually the less opportunity they have to do that for themselves. Is that my help is actually standing in the way of this moment where they go, aha, you know? Because when I was in that sort of way of thinking, blended with those parts, having a student like fail their senior recital hearing was so painful. But it wasn't actually painful because I felt so much for the student. It was embarrassing for me. And so as I was able to move out of the way, some of them failed, but you know what? They figured out what they actually wanted to do. They didn't fail the second time, and it wasn't because I made them do it. Any other thoughts? Well, thank you so much for coming. And there is, if you came in late, there's a handout up on the front of just some more practical ways that you might be able